The last time I walked into the Oak Creek Elementary office, I felt like I was entering a lion's den where I was the only piece of meat. I was 35, a single mother to an 8-year-old girl named Sophie, and I was exhausted. My palms were sweating, and my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Across from me sat the school principal and a couple, the Millers, people who wore their wealth like armor and looked at my faded cardigan and tired eyes as if I were a stain on their pristine reputation. They didn't hide their smirks. To them, I was just another struggling single mom who had failed to discipline her child. They had no idea that with one single phone call, I could summon a force that would shatter their arrogance and make them regret every cruel word they had spat in my direction. My name is Elena Ross. I've spent the last 10 years building walls. I grew up in a house where affection was a transaction and abandonment was the only constant. My father, Richard, had walked out on us when I was 10, leaving my mother to work 3 jobs. I learned early that a man's love is fragile, and relying on anyone is just setting yourself up for a fall. Years later, I met David, a charming architect who made me feel safe. But when I got pregnant with Sophie, the charm evaporated. The late nights became late meetings, the warmth became cold indifference, and eventually he left. He didn't look back, and he didn't send a dime. That was the moment I locked my heart away. I promised myself, I will never need anyone again. I built a life for Sophie and me. I worked as a freelance graphic designer, juggling deadlines and school runs. I was unbreakable, or so I told myself. Then everything changed when Sophie started coming home from school in tears. A girl named Chloe Miller, whose father was a high-profile hedge fund manager, had decided Sophie was her favorite target. "You don't have a dad because your mom is a loser," Chloe would hiss in the playground. "That's why he left. Nobody wants people like you." Sophie, usually a bright artistic child, grew quiet and withdrawn. When Chloe finally destroyed Sophie's handmade science project, a delicate solar system model, Sophie had enough. She pushed Chloe hard. Chloe tripped, skinned her elbow, and ran home to her powerful parents. The next morning, the call came. Principal Thorne's voice was icy. When I arrived, the Millers were already there, dressed in designer labels, ready to play judge and jury. "Ms. Ross," the principal began, not even offering me a seat. "Sophie's violent outburst is unacceptable. Chloe has suffered a physical injury, and her parents are, rightfully, concerned about the safety of their daughter." I started to explain the months of bullying, the taunts, the destruction of property. But Mrs. Miller cut me off with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. "Spare us the excuses, Elena. We know that single-parent households often struggle with behavioral issues. It's really quite sad, but Sophie simply doesn't belong in a school with well-adjusted children." Mr. Miller slid a document across the desk. It was an admission of hostile conduct and an agreement to withdraw Sophie from the school. "Sign it," he said smoothly. "If you don't, we'll see to it that this incident goes on her permanent record, and we'll explore further legal avenues." I felt the blood drain from my face. They were trying to ruin my daughter's future because they thought they could crush a woman they deemed inadequate. I felt humiliated, helpless, and completely alone. I didn't sign it. I just walked out, my chest burning with the weight of my own pride. That night, Sophie looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Mommy, are they right? Is it my fault Daddy left? Are we bad people?" That question broke the last of my resolve. I realized my independence wasn't strength. It was a cage. I had been too scared and too damaged to reach out to the one person who had been trying to bridge the gap for years. My estranged stepfather, Arthur. He was a man I had rejected since the day he married my mother, simply because he was a man, and I didn't trust any of them. But now, Sophie needed a protector. She needed to know that she wasn't alone. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone. I scrolled to the contact I had blocked and unblocked a dozen times over the last decade. I hit call. Arthur answered on the first ring. His voice was older than I remembered, but it retained that same quiet, steady anchor that had always unnerved me. "Elena?" he asked. Not with surprise, but with the tone of a man who had been expecting the call for a lifetime. I couldn't speak at first. The weight of 20 years of stubborn distance felt like a physical block in my throat. But then the image of Sophie's tear-streaked face flashed in my mind, and the dam broke. I told him everything. I recounted the months of torment, the principal's cold dismissal, the Millers' smug arrogance, and the predatory document they had tried to force me to sign. A document that essentially blamed my motherhood for the bullying Sophie endured. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I braced myself for the typical platitudes I had rejected for decades. Instead, I heard the sound of Arthur standing up, the sharp click of a pen, and a shift in his tone that chilled the air. "Elena," he said, his voice dropping into a low, controlled register of pure steel. "You have done nothing wrong. Those people have fundamentally miscalculated who they are dealing with. Do not sign that document. Do not speak another word to them. I am coming to Seattle." "Arthur, I don't want your money," I insisted, my voice cracking. "This is not about money," he replied, his voice softening just enough to remind me that he had been my mother's husband and my protector, long before I had learned to build my walls. "This is about family, and you have been my family since the day I met you. I am sorry I allowed you to push me away for so long, but I will not allow you to face this injustice alone. Not ever again." He instructed me to meet him at the school the following morning at 9 a.m. sharp. He would handle the logistics. That night, sleep was impossible. I paced the floor, haunted by the image of the Millers' smirks and Principal Thorne's indifference. Had I just invited more disappointment into my life? Was I setting Sophie up for another letdown? But when 8:45 a.m. arrived, a sleek, unassuming car pulled up to the school entrance. Arthur stepped out. He wasn't the man I remembered. He was sharper, more formidable, and carried the quiet, undeniable authority of someone who held immense influence in the city's private sectors. He looked at me, gave a firm, reassuring nod, and placed a grounding hand on my shoulder. "Deep breath, Elena," he said. "We are going to restore the order here." We walked into Principal Thorne's office together. The atmosphere in the room was instantly transformed. The Millers were already there, leaning back in their chairs. But when they saw Arthur, the smugness on Mr. Miller's face faltered. He clearly recognized him. The city's board of directors and the philanthropic circles all knew Arthur's name. Principal Thorne stood up, his face losing its color as he stammered. Mr. Arthur, I didn't realize. I was under the impression this was a simple disciplinary matter." Arthur didn't sit. He stood tall, looking directly at the Millers. "I am Elena's father, and Sophie's grandfather," he stated calmly. "And I believe there has been a profound miscalculation regarding who is being disciplined here today." Mrs. Miller, her composure fraying, tried to regain her footing. "Mr. Arthur, surely you understand that Sophie's aggressive behavior against our daughter is a liability. We are simply protecting the school environment." Arthur didn't blink. He looked at her with a calm, terrifying precision. "Mrs. Miller, let me clarify the reality of the situation. Your daughter has spent weeks psychologically tormenting my granddaughter, using cruel, targeted insults regarding her family structure. When your daughter destroyed Sophie's property and mocked her for being fatherless, my granddaughter defended herself. That is not violence. That is self-preservation." Mr. Miller leaned forward, attempting to bluster. "With all due respect, the school policy—" "With all due respect, Mr. Miller," Arthur interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous low steel. "Has your daughter's bullying been reported in accordance with the school's own anti-harassment policy? Because I have records of every incident, the dates, the witnesses, and the school's systemic failure to act. That is not merely a policy issue. That is negligence and defamation." The room went deathly silent. Arthur turned his attention to Principal Thorne, who looked as if he might faint. "Here is the path forward, Mr. Thorne. You will reinstate Sophie immediately with a formal written apology from the administration. The Millers will issue a comprehensive written apology to both Eleanor and Sophie. Furthermore, Chloe will be required to undergo a formal conflict resolution program. If any of this is refused, I will take this matter to the school board, the local media, and my personal legal counsel to investigate why this institution allows such targeted harassment." The Millers went from arrogant to panicked in seconds. Andrew Miller tried to object, but Arthur silenced him with a single icy look. "I suggest you consider the cost of your arrogance, Mr. Miller. My resources are quite substantial, and my patience for the mistreatment of my family is non-existent." 20 minutes later, I walked out of that office holding a signed letter of apology and the official notice of Sophie's reinstatement. The Millers had been utterly dismantled, their power rendered useless against the weight of the truth. Arthur didn't gloat. As we walked out into the bright afternoon sun, he squeezed my shoulder. "You are a magnificent mother, Elena. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you are alone in this." Standing there, I finally felt the armor I had spent 20 years building melt away. I hadn't lost my independence. I had simply stopped using it as a weapon against the people who actually loved me. Sophie got her school life back, and I got something I had denied myself for far too long: a father. I realized then that family isn't about blood. It's about the people who show up when the world decides to turn against you. And for the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving, safe in the knowledge that I was finally, truly protected.